You think the worst pain is betrayal? It is not. The true nightmare is spending 7 years breaking my own heart over a physical flaw that never existed, only to have the architect of that lie mock me in public. But in Chicago, no secret stays buried, especially when my ex is too blind to realize the baby boy in his arms is his absolute ruin. Welcome to reality. Liam, the real game begins right now. Hello, dear listeners of Maya Revenge Stories. We are truly grateful for your continued support, but unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team members to cover their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or comments of this video. My name is Madeline Bradley, and this is my story. The wind off Lake Michigan was particularly brutal on that Tuesday morning, cutting through the heavy wool of my coat as I pushed through the revolving glass doors of Crestview Plaza. The grand marble lobby of the tower stretched out before me, a sterile monument to Chicago's corporate elite. This was my project. As the lead designer for Vanguard Horizon Design, I knew every vein in the imported Italian stone, every angle of the vaulted glass ceiling, every cold, sharp edge of this suffocating space. It was a place designed to make you feel small, and for a fleeting second, that was exactly how I felt when I stopped dead in my tracks. Exactly 10 steps away from me stood Liam, my ex-husband. He was wrapped in a tailored cashmere overcoat that probably cost more than most people made in 3 months. But it was not the coat that made my chest tighten. It was the bundle he was holding against his chest, a baby boy, wrapped in pale blue, laughing brightly, and standing right next to him, adjusting the baby's knitted hat with the practiced ease of a mother, was Chloe, my former maid of honor, my ex-best friend. It had been exactly 1 year since the divorce was finalized, 1 year since he packed his bags and walked out, claiming he needed a real woman to give him the family I never could. Liam spotted me. I saw the immediate shift in his posture, the way his chest puffed out, the predatory gleam in his eyes. He did not look away or politely nod. Instead, he raised his voice, ensuring that the passing executives and sleekly dressed receptionists could hear every word echoing off the polished stone walls. "Well, if it is not Madeline," Liam called out, an arrogant smirk playing on his lips. "Still burying yourself in blueprints. I see. I suppose it is the only thing you can produce." He adjusted his grip on the baby, making sure the child was fully displayed like a golden trophy. "Say hello to the lady, buddy," Liam cooed loudly to the child, then looked right back at me. "It is a shame things did not work out between us, Maddie, but looking at my son now, I know leaving was the smartest thing I ever did. Some women are just meant to be mothers, and some are just empty vessels. I needed a family, not a useless, barren wife." Whispers rippled through the lobby. A few people turned their heads, their eyes darting between us, hungry for the morning drama. Liam drank in the attention, his ego inflating with every passing second. He was playing the role of the triumphant, virile patriarch to absolute perfection, basking in his own fabricated glory. A year ago, those words would have shattered me. I would have run to the nearest restroom, locked myself in a stall, and sobbed until my lungs burned. But today, the air in my lungs was made of ice. I did not flinch. I did not scream. Instead, I let my gaze drift from Liam's arrogant face down to Chloe. She was trying to smile, projecting the image of a radiant, victorious new mother, but her eyes were dead. They darted nervously around the lobby, avoiding my stare at all costs. I looked closer. Her knuckles were bone white, gripping the handles of the luxury baby stroller so tightly that her hands were visibly trembling. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. This was not the posture of a woman living her happily ever after. This was the posture of a hostage terrified that the bomb strapped to her chest was about to detonate. Liam kept talking, projecting his voice even louder. making some grand remark about his latest real estate acquisition and how perfectly it aligned with his new, complete family life. He was completely oblivious to the panic radiating from the woman standing right next to him. Before he could launch into another humiliating monologue, a sharp vibration against my hip interrupted him. I calmly pulled my phone from my pocket. It was a text message from Elias Thorne, my attorney. The message read, "Get up to my office right now. He just made a fatal mistake." I stared at the glowing screen for 3 seconds. The suffocating weight of the last 7 years seemed to evaporate into the chilled air of the lobby. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked up at Liam, who was waiting for me to break down or lash out. I did neither. I gave him a slow, perfectly hollow smile. It was not a smile of defeat, nor was it a smile of warmth. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey step willingly into a trap. "Have a lovely morning, Liam," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly composed. I did not wait for his response. I did not look at Chloe. I simply adjusted my briefcase, turned on my heel, and walked past them with the rhythmic, commanding click of my heels echoing off the marble. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the penthouse floor, and watched the brass doors slide shut on Liam's confused, deflated face. The elevator doors opened silently on the 42nd floor of the glass skyscraper, releasing me into the hushed, mahogany-paneled reception area of Thorne and Associates. I bypassed the receptionist with a brief nod and pushed straight through the heavy oak doors of Elias Thorne's corner office. The panoramic windows offered a dizzying view of downtown Chicago, the steel structures stretching toward the gray sky. But my focus was entirely on the man sitting behind the massive walnut desk. Elias was not just a divorce attorney. He was a financial forensic genius. He did not say a word as I walked in. He simply reached out and dropped a thick, leather-bound file folder onto the center of his desk. The heavy thud echoed in the quiet room. "Sit down, Madeline," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave lower than usual, carrying a sharp edge of disbelief. "You are going to want to be sitting for this." I took the leather armchair opposite him, keeping my posture perfectly straight. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the lingering chill of the lobby still clinging to my skin. "What did he do, Elias?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Elias leaned forward, flipping the heavy folder open. He slid a stack of banking statements, wire transfer logs, and corporate registration documents toward me. The dense columns of numbers printed on the crisp white paper made me hold my breath. "During your divorce proceedings exactly 1 year ago," Elias began, tapping a gold pen against a heavily highlighted document, "Liam sat in a deposition room, raised his right hand, and swore under penalty of perjury that his net worth was tied up entirely in heavily leveraged domestic assets. We split what was on the table, but it turns out the table was rigged." I scanned the documents. The corporate names meant nothing to me, but the routing numbers and the final balances screamed off the page. "He hid the money," I stated, the realization washing over me like ice water. "He did not just hide it," Elias corrected, his eyes narrowing with a predator's focus. "He orchestrated a highly sophisticated capital flight. In the 8 months leading up to your separation, Liam siphoned exactly $1.2 million out of his primary operational accounts. He funneled the cash through a labyrinth of offshore shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands and Belize. He made it look like aggressive real estate investment losses on paper, effectively wiping the capital off the domestic grid before the judge ever struck the gavel. My heart hammered against my ribs. $1.2 million. While I was packing up my life into cardboard boxes, agonizing over every penny to afford a small apartment, the man who called me a useless burden was quietly hoarding a fortune stolen from our marital estate. "How did you find this?" I asked, looking up at him. "These accounts are buried deep. A standard audit would never catch this." A cold, humorless smile touched the corners of Elias's mouth. "We did not find it. Madeline, he handed it to us." I frowned, my brow furrowing in confusion. "Why would he do that?" Because of his own insatiable greed, Elias said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. Liam could not just be satisfied with getting away with fraud. His ego demanded more. 2 weeks ago, he set his sights on buying out Apex Holdings, his biggest commercial real estate rival in the city. To acquire a firm of that size, he needed a massive injection of institutional capital. He applied for a staggering commercial loan from a Tier 1 investment bank. Elias slid another document across the desk. It was a credit application, thick with legal jargon and financial disclosures. When you apply for a loan of that magnitude, the bank does not just ask for your tax returns, they demand a microscopic, unrestricted view of your global liquidity. They want to see every single asset you control anywhere in the world to guarantee the collateral. Liam was so arrogant, so utterly convinced of his own invincibility, that he voluntarily disclosed the offshore shell companies to the underwriters to prove his financial leverage. I stared at Liam's signature at the bottom of the disclosure form. The ink loops were bold, confident, completely oblivious to the trap he was setting for himself. He wanted the buyout so desperately that he forgot the cardinal rule of committing perjury: you can never put the truth on paper again. The bank's automated compliance software flagged the sudden appearance of $1.2 million in foreign assets, Elias continued, his tone clinical and precise. Because those assets were shielded during a documented marital dissolution, it triggered a mandatory secondary review. A contact of mine in their risk management department flagged it for me. The loan application exposed every single hidden asset he swore in federal court did not exist. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the magnitude of the revelation. The anger that usually flared inside me when I thought of Liam was entirely absent. In its place was a profound, chilling clarity. My ex-husband was not going to be destroyed by my resentment. He was going to be annihilated by his own vanity. His desperate need to look like the smartest, wealthiest man in the room had just handed me the match to burn his entire life to the ground. So, we file a motion to reopen the divorce settlement, I said, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying absolute authority. We take him to court for fraud. Oh, we will do much more than that, Elias replied. But before we draft the subpoenas, there is one more thing. And frankly, Madeline, this is the part that does not make any logical sense. The triumphant energy in the room suddenly shifted, growing thick and uncertain. Elias opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a single, wrinkled sheet of paper. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the desk, looking at me with a mixture of professional caution and genuine concern. When I started pulling the threads on his financial history, I requested a blanket sweep of his background to see if there were any other liabilities. This included a dive into his old health insurance records from years ago, long before you two were married. Elias finally slid the paper toward me. There are massive, illogical loopholes in his medical history. Madeline, treatments and consultations that were heavily redacted. I have already petitioned a judge to unseal the full medical file. I do not know what he has been hiding, but whatever it is, it might be an even bigger lie than the money. I stared at the medical document, the sterile black text swimming before my eyes, and for the first time that day, a genuine shiver ran down my spine. For the next 48 hours, I buried myself entirely in the architectural blueprints at Vanguard Horizon Design. The geometric precision of the Crestview Plaza penthouse was the only thing keeping my mind tethered to reality. I stared at the digital renderings on my massive monitors, trying to lose myself in the calculations of load-bearing walls and tensile strength, but the sterile, orderly world of structural engineering could not block out the chaotic noise inside my head, the offshore accounts, the perjury, the mysterious, redacted medical file from Elias's desk. The numbers and the secrets swirled together until my vision blurred. By Thursday afternoon, the walls of my office felt like they were closing in. I needed air, and I desperately needed a strong, bitter espresso. I threw my coat over my shoulders and crossed the busy intersection to the upscale corner cafe opposite my building. I ordered my drink, staring blankly at the barista pulling the shot, my mind a million miles away. When I turned around with the warm cup in my hand, my breath hitched in my throat. Sitting in the darkest, most isolated booth at the back of the cafe was a ghost. It was Chloe, but she looked absolutely nothing like the triumphant, radiant woman I had seen parading in the marble lobby just 2 days prior. The carefully curated social media illusion had completely evaporated. The woman sitting before me looked broken, haggard, and consumed by a feral kind of panic. Her skin, usually glowing with expensive treatments, was sallow and stretched painfully tight across her cheekbones. Dark, bruised purple shadows hung heavily beneath her eyes, the undeniable, permanent stamp of someone who had not slept a full night in months. She was wearing a thick designer sweater, but it hung off her shrinking frame as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup, trembling so violently that the dark liquid inside was sloshing over the plastic lid. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide, bloodshot, and frantic. "Madeline," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking, sounding like a woman begging for water in a desert. "Please, I just need 10 minutes. Sit down, please." I stood frozen for a moment, the heat of the espresso seeping through the cardboard sleeve into my palm. The sheer audacity of this woman daring to approach me was staggering, but I did not walk away. I slid slowly into the leather booth opposite her, not out of any sense of pity, but driven by a cold, calculated, and predatory curiosity. I kept my posture perfectly rigid, my face an impenetrable mask of stone. "What exactly do you want from me, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, icy register, devoid of even a trace of human warmth. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing nervously. "Did Liam ever get angry when you were married? I mean, really angry? The kind of blind, terrifying rage that makes you want to lock the bedroom door and hide?" She stammered, her gaze darting frantically toward the cafe windows, as if she expected a sniper to take her out. "Especially when you asked him about money." I did not blink. I kept my expression entirely neutral, absorbing her terror. Liam and I did not have violent arguments about finances, or so I believed at the time. "Why are you asking me this?" Chloe leaned in closer across the table, her breath shallow and reeking of stale coffee and pure, unfiltered anxiety. "There are letters, Madeline, horrible, threatening letters, demands for massive payments. I found them stuffed deep inside his golf bag in the garage. They have no return addresses, and he is spending money like a madman. Completely paranoid. He is wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars to accounts I do not recognize, buying untraceable assets." When I finally found the courage to ask him where the money was going and who was threatening him, he cornered me against the kitchen counter. He screamed so loudly and looked at me with such pure hatred that I truly thought he was going to kill me. In my mind, the pieces of the puzzle began violently slamming together. The $1.2 million Elias found in the Cayman Islands. Liam was bleeding his hidden, illegal stash. But to whom? Why the extortion letters? Who knew his secrets well enough to bleed a narcissistic sociopath dry? I looked at the pathetic, trembling woman sitting across from me, and any lingering shred of sympathy withered and died. I absolutely refused to play the role of the comforting psychological therapist for the traitor who had slept in my bed, destroyed my marriage, and stolen my life. "You made your choice, Chloe," I said, my words slicing through the heavy air between us like a freshly sharpened scalpel. "You wanted the lavish lifestyle. You wanted the successful, wealthy husband. You wanted the perfect picture to flaunt to the world. You bought the ticket, and now you get to ride the ride. Do not dare come crying to me because the golden prince you stole turned out to be a monster living in a house of cards." My absolute lack of mercy broke whatever fragile, desperate dam was holding her sanity together. Chloe buried her face in her trembling hands and began to weep. It was not a delicate cry. It was heavy, ragged, ugly sobs that shook her entire fragile body. "You do not understand," she choked out between violent gasps for air. "It is not just the money. It is the baby. He has been terribly sick. The specialists at the children's hospital ordered a comprehensive genetic blood panel last week to check for a rare autoimmune marker. She wiped her nose with the back of her shaking hand, her expensive mascara running down her pale cheeks in thick, ugly black streaks, completely destroying the last remnants of her glamorous facade. The doctors explained they needed a baseline genetic comparison from both biological parents to isolate the marker, she continued, her voice dropping to a terrified, trembling whisper. They asked for a simple cheek swab from Liam, just a standard, routine DNA sample. Madeline, he refused. He went completely ballistic in the clinic. He screamed at the doctors, threatened to sue the entire hospital board, and physically dragged me and the baby out of the building. Madeline. What kind of father violently refuses a simple cotton swab to save the life of his own flesh and blood? The bustling noise of the coffee shop instantly vanished. The world around me seemed to stop spinning, leaving me in a vacuum of profound, deafening silence. A genetic test, a violent refusal to provide a DNA sample. My mind raced back to Elias's office, slamming into the memory of the heavily redacted medical files from Liam's youth, the secret he had buried so deeply that he was willing to risk his own child's health to keep it hidden. I stared at Chloe, her weeping form looking so incredibly pathetic and small against the leather booth. In that exact moment, a terrifying, brilliant, and explosive suspicion began to bloom in the darkest corners of my mind. The mask was no longer just cracking. It was shattering into a million jagged pieces, and the truth underneath was deadlier than I could have ever imagined. The silence in Elias Thorne's office was so profound, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It had been 48 hours since my disturbing encounter with Chloe at the coffee shop. I had spent 2 days analyzing every single word she had stammered out, every terrified twitch of her hands. But nothing could have prepared me for the document Elias had just slid across his mahogany desk. It was a sealed medical dossier from a university hospital, dated 15 years ago, obtained through a federal judge's order tied to our ongoing financial fraud investigation. I had to pull a lot of strings to get a federal judge to unseal this, Elias said, his voice completely devoid of its usual confident cadence. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was profound. Genuine pity. Madeline, I am so sorry. You need to read the summary on page 4. My fingers were numb as I flipped through the heavy, yellowed pages. My eyes scanned the dense medical terminology until I found the highlighted paragraph. It detailed a severe, near-fatal bout of an infectious viral disease Liam had contracted during his sophomore year of college. The virus had triggered a rare but catastrophic secondary infection, causing massive internal complications. I read the doctor's final diagnostic conclusion 3 times to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me. The damage to his reproductive organs was absolute and irreversible. He had a 0 sperm count. He was 100% permanently sterile. The date on the official medical diagnosis proved it. Liam was 20 years old when he sat in a doctor's office and was told he would never, ever be able to father a biological child. The thick paper slipped from my trembling fingers and landed softly on the desk. A high-pitched, violent ringing noise erupted in my ears, drowning out the ambient hum of the city traffic outside the window. For 7 years, 7 agonizing, soul-crushing years, the memories hit me with the force of a physical blow. I remembered the harsh, fluorescent lights of the fertility clinics. I remembered the distinct, nauseating smell of antiseptic wipes and cold ultrasound gel. I remembered sitting on crinkly paper beds, shivering in my thin gown, while doctors looked at me with sympathetic, pitiful eyes, suggesting new regimens, new diets, new invasive procedures. I took the blame. I took all of it. I convinced myself that my body was broken, a defective vessel that was failing the man I loved. I remembered the nightly ritual of the hormone treatments. I would stand in our pristine marble bathroom, staring at my reflection with tears streaming down my face, enduring the sharp sting of the prescribed daily injections until my body ached in constant, agonizing distress. The synthetic hormones ravaged my mind and my body, plunging me into deep, suffocating depressions. And Liam, the memory of his face made bile rise in my throat. He would stand right beside me in that bathroom. He would gently wipe the tears from my cheeks, kiss my forehead, and whisper soothing lies into my ear. "It is not your fault, Maddie," he would say, playing the role of the endlessly patient, supportive husband. "We just have to keep trying. I am not giving up on us." He watched me torture myself. He watched me endure excruciating physical pain and profound psychological devastation. He sat at holiday family dinners and remained completely silent while his mother made passive-aggressive, cruel remarks about how a real woman would have given her a grandson by now. He let me bear the shame, the guilt, and the intense public humiliation of our infertility, all while knowing with absolute medical certainty that he was the one shooting blanks. He orchestrated a 7-year psychological horror show simply because his fragile, toxic ego could not handle the world knowing he was biologically flawed. The sheer, unimaginable cruelty of it paralyzed me. The betrayal did not just break my heart, it completely incinerated it, burning away every last trace of the woman I used to be. I closed my eyes and took a long, shuddering breath. When I opened them again, the hot, blinding tears that had been threatening to fall simply vanished. The overwhelming grief instantly froze, hardening into a freezing, absolute zero rage. My mind snapped into a state of terrifying, hyper-focused lucidity. The fog of pain lifted, and in its place was a razor-sharp clarity. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my brain with a deafening crack. If Liam was diagnosed as completely, irreversibly sterile when he was 20 years old, if there was a 0% chance he could ever naturally conceive a child, then whose 1-year-old baby boy was he proudly parading around the grand lobby of Crestview Plaza? Suddenly, Chloe's frantic, terrified confession at the coffee shop made perfect, horrifying sense. The specialists at the Children's Hospital demanding a genetic blood panel, Liam going completely ballistic, screaming at the doctors, and violently refusing to provide a simple cotton swab of his DNA. He refused the test because he knew exactly what the laboratory results would show. A cheek swab would not just prove that he was not the father of Chloe's sick child. It would permanently expose his lifelong lie to the entire world. He was perfectly willing to let an innocent, sick infant suffer without a proper medical diagnosis just to protect his own fabricated masculinity. He was playing the ultimate role of the virile patriarch, using another man's child as a golden trophy to prove his superiority, while Chloe was trapped in a living nightmare, holding a baby whose true lineage was a dangerous, explosive secret. "Madeline," Elias said softly, breaking through the heavy silence of the office. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "I have the drafted motions right here. Say the word, and I will file the fraud charges immediately. We can have the federal authorities arrest him at his home by Monday morning. We can end this right now." I slowly looked up from the medical report. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the office window. The vulnerable, broken ex-wife who had walked into this building was dead. The woman looking back at me was an entirely different creature, born from 7 years of borrowed pain. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm, smooth and cold like polished marble. "Do not file a single piece of paper yet. A quiet arrest on a rainy Monday morning is entirely too good for him." Elias frowned, confusion flickering in his sharp eyes. "Madeline, what are you thinking? We have the kill shot right here." "He wants to be seen." "Elias," I replied, standing up and smoothing the wrinkles from my skirt. "His entire existence is built on the applause of others. He wants the elite of Chicago to look at him and marvel at his immense wealth, his perfect family, his absolute dominance." I placed my hand flat on the medical folder, feeling the weight of the ultimate truth beneath my palm. I am not going to destroy him in a quiet courtroom. I am going to strip him of his money, his family, and his fake, pathetic manhood on the exact stage where he yearns to shine the brightest. Let him enjoy his grand delusion for just a little while longer. The higher he climbs, the more spectacular the fall is going to be. We did not waste a single second. The moment I left Elias's office, The gears of a much larger, darker machine began to turn. Within 2 hours, Elias and I were sitting in a dimly lit, soundproofed conference room with Marcus Vance. Marcus was a seasoned private investigator whose entire reputation in the Chicago underworld was built on destroying the impenetrable, heavily guarded secrets of the ultra-rich. He was expensive, utterly ruthless, and he did not ask moral questions. I slid a blank check across the polished mahogany table, along with a single, uncompromising directive. I told Marcus to tear apart every single second of Chloe's life from exactly 14 months ago. That was the precise window of time when Liam and I were agonizingly finalizing our vicious divorce, and Chloe was conveniently spending her evenings offering my husband a shoulder to cry on. The clock was ticking loudly in my head. We needed absolute proof before Liam could execute his massive corporate buyout and bury his tracks forever. Marcus worked with terrifying, relentless efficiency. It took him less than 72 hours to strike gold, and the gold he found was covered in dirt and incredibly dangerous. On a rainy Thursday evening, Marcus tossed a thick stack of glossy surveillance photographs onto Elias's glass table. The images were taken from a discreet angle outside a private, hyper-exclusive luxury high-rise in the Gold Coast district. The photos clearly showed Chloe, wearing an oversized trench coat and dark sunglasses, slipping through a heavily guarded private service entrance late at night. She was not visiting a therapist or an innocent friend, Marcus said, his voice gravelly and precise, cutting through the silence of the room. 14 months ago, your former best friend was deeply engaged in a highly reckless, intensely secretive affair. The penthouse she was visiting multiple times a week belongs to Julian Sterling. The name hit the room like a physical shockwave, making the air instantly heavier. Julian Sterling was not just a wealthy man. He was a notorious, predatory billionaire hedge fund manager known for devouring weak companies, destroying livelihoods, and ruining anyone who dared to cross his bottom line. He was a man who commanded absolute fear in the financial sector. But far more importantly, Julian Sterling was the primary institutional backer keeping Liam's entire real estate firm afloat. It gets much, much worse, Elias interjected. He was staring at his tablet, rapidly cross-referencing Marcus's timeline with the banking records we had obtained earlier in the week. A sharp, predatory smile cut across the lawyer's face. Madeline, do you remember the $1.2 million Liam routed through the Cayman Islands? The money we originally thought he hid to screw you out of the divorce settlement. I nodded slowly, the anticipation making my pulse race like a drum against my ribs. Liam did not just hide that money, Elias said, his voice dropping into a deadly, echoing whisper. He stole it. I just tracked the origin point of the offshore deposits through a series of ghost vendors. Liam was quietly, systematically embezzling capital directly from Julian Sterling's own investment fund. He was skimming massive amounts of cash off the top of his own building projects just to maintain his fabricated, lavish lifestyle. Those blackmail letters Chloe found hidden at their house. They are not from a bank. They are almost certainly from an internal auditor at Sterling's firm who caught the discrepancy and has been quietly bleeding Liam dry, extorting him before taking the evidence directly to Julian. The sheer, colossal stupidity of it was staggering. Liam was not just a liar and a cheat. He was a dead man walking. He was actively robbing a financial shark, a billionaire who would gladly destroy him without a second thought. Speaking of the billionaire, Marcus said smoothly, interrupting my thoughts. He reached into his heavy coat and pulled out 2 sealed plastic evidence bags. In the first bag was a crumpled, disposable espresso cup. In the second bag was a small, chewed-up plastic pacifier. Sterling travels with a private security detail, which made this slightly complicated, Marcus explained, tapping the bag with the coffee cup. But he has a very rigid routine. He drinks his morning espresso at exactly 8 o'clock at his private club. I intercepted the cup immediately after his driver tossed it into a private bin. The pacifier was significantly easier. Your ex-husband's lovely new wife threw it into a public trash can at Lincoln Park after the baby dropped it in the mud during a frantic, stressed-out walk. Marcus reached into his briefcase and slid a folded, officially stamped laboratory report across the table. I rushed both genetic samples to a private, off-the-books medical facility outside the city, Marcus continued, leaning back in his chair and folding his arms. The results are completely definitive and legally binding, a 99.9% biological match. Julian Sterling is the biological father of that baby boy. The magnitude of the deception was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of human garbage. Liam had built his entire arrogant, boastful existence on a mountain of high treason. He was parading around a child that biologically belonged to the very billionaire he was actively embezzling money from. The poetic justice of it all was so perfect, so incredibly, violently lethal, that I could actually feel the power shifting entirely into my hands. I held the absolute destruction of 3 different lives in a single, crisp manila envelope. "So," Elias said, leaning forward and resting his elbows heavily on the desk, his eyes burning with legal anticipation. "Do we send this packet anonymously to Julian's office? Do we let the billionaire tear Liam apart behind closed doors?" I stood up slowly and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Looking down at the sprawling, glittering grid of downtown Chicago, the city lights were just starting to turn on against the darkening sky. A quiet, private demise was exactly what cowards like Liam and Chloe prayed for when the walls finally closed in on them. They wanted to hide their shame behind closed doors, non-disclosure agreements, and hushed settlements. I absolutely refused to grant them that luxury. "No," I said, turning back to face the 2 men, my voice entirely devoid of mercy. "We do not whisper this in the dark. We are going to turn on the brightest lights in the city." The grand opening gala for the Crestview Plaza Tower was scheduled to take place in exactly 6 days. It was the most highly anticipated architectural and real estate event of the decade in Chicago. Every major investor, socialite, and media outlet would be crammed into the penthouse ballroom. It was the exact stage Liam desperately craved to validate his fake, elite status to the world. I left the law office, walked back to Vanguard Horizon Design, and sat down at my desk. As the lead architect and project director, I had absolute, unilateral control over the ultra-exclusive VIP guest list for the gala. I opened my top drawer and pulled out 3 heavy, gold-embossed invitation cards, with a perfectly steady hand and a cold, calculating heart. I wrote out the names in flowing ink. 1 prime invitation for Mr. Liam and Mrs. Chloe, and 1 placed strategically right at the central honor table, for Mr. Julian Sterling. I slipped the invitations into their jet-black envelopes and sealed them tightly. The web was perfectly spun. The match was struck. Now, all I had to do was put on a beautiful dress and watch their entire world burn to ash. The glass canopy of the Crestview Plaza penthouse sparkled like a diamond suspended above the glittering grid of Chicago. The grand opening gala was everything I had designed it to be. A breathtaking monument to wealth and architectural triumph. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos floated through the crowd, carrying silver trays of crystal champagne flutes. The room was packed with the absolute apex of the city's elite. Billionaires, socialites, and real estate titans were all here, bathed in the soft, warm glow of the bespoke chandeliers. I stood on the landing of the grand marble staircase, looking down at the sea of power and influence. I wore a backless emerald gown, holding a single glass of champagne, my expression perfectly serene. And then, I saw them. Liam walked through the massive double doors, practically vibrating with arrogance. He wore a custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo that screamed new money. His hand was clamped firmly around Chloe's waist. He was smiling so widely I thought his face might split, completely intoxicated by the illusion that he finally belonged among these titans. He did not bring the baby tonight, choosing instead to play the role of the high society power couple. Beside him, Chloe looked like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. Her smile was incredibly rigid, her eyes darting nervously around the massive room. Liam immediately scanned the crowd, and the moment his eyes locked onto mine standing elevated on the staircase, his smug grin widened. He could not resist. He let go of Chloe and began weaving through the crowd, making a direct line toward me. He wanted an audience. He wanted to assert his dominance one last time in front of the people he idolized. "Madeline," Liam announced loudly as he reached the bottom of the stairs, ensuring the influential guests standing nearby turned to look. "I have to admit, the building is not terrible. It is a decent effort for someone who only knows how to build empty things, but looking around at the real power in this room, you have to realize you are entirely out of your league. You design the boxes. Maddie, men like me own them." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne. I did not say a word. I just looked past his shoulder. "What?" Liam sneered, his ego bristling at my absolute silence. Nothing to say. No bitter remarks from the barren ex-wife. Before the next breath could leave his lungs, the heavy atmosphere of the party violently shifted. 4 men wearing inconspicuous dark suits, who had been blending seamlessly into the elegant crowd, suddenly stepped forward, entirely surrounding Liam. They did not carry champagne flutes. They carried the heavy, undeniable authority of the federal government. "Liam Bradley," the lead agent asked, his voice cutting through the elegant string quartet playing in the background. He pulled a leather wallet from his coat, flashing a silver badge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, we are serving you with an immediate federal summons for wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and perjury. As of 5 minutes ago, a federal judge ordered the absolute freezing of all your personal and corporate assets, domestic and offshore." The music seemed to grind to a halt. The ambient chatter of the elite crowd instantly died. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the commotion. Liam's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by the pale, chalky mask of pure terror. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked wildly around the room, realizing the very people he wanted to impress were now staring at him like he was a diseased criminal. "There is a mistake," Liam stammered, his voice cracking, raising his hands in a pathetic gesture of defense. "I am a major developer. My financial backer is Julian Sterling. Julian." Liam spun around, desperately searching the crowd for his billionaire savior. He spotted Julian sitting at the premier honor table in the center of the room. But Julian Sterling was not looking at the federal agents. Julian was staring down at a jet-black envelope that a waiter had handed him exactly 2 minutes prior. He was holding the thick stack of papers I had meticulously prepared. The financial audits proving Liam had stolen $1.2 million directly from Julian's fund. And right on top, the legally binding genetic test results proving Julian was the biological father of Liam's supposed son. Julian stood up. The billionaire did not look angry. He looked like a natural disaster about to strike. He walked slowly across the ballroom floor. The crowd parted for him in absolute, terrified silence. "Julian, thank God!" Liam gasped, stepping toward him, sweat beading on his forehead. "Tell these agents who I am. Tell them this is a massive misunderstanding." Julian stopped less than a foot away from Liam. He looked at the trembling man. Then his gaze shifted to Chloe, who had just rushed over, her face completely drained of blood. Without a single word, Julian pulled his right arm back and delivered a vicious, open-handed strike directly across Liam's face. The sharp, echoing crack sounded like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. Liam collapsed onto the polished marble floor, blood instantly welling at the corner of his mouth. "You arrogant, pathetic parasite," Julian roared, his voice shaking the crystal glasses on the tables. He threw the heavy stack of papers directly into Liam's bleeding face. "You steal from my company to fund your fake life. You embezzle my money, and then you have the absolute audacity to parade my biological son around this city and call him yours." The collective gasp from the elite crowd sucked all the oxygen out of the room. The absolute destruction was instantaneous and total. The lie was exposed in the most spectacular, humiliating fashion possible. Chloe let out a gut-wrenching wail. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the hard marble floor, tearing at her expensive hair, sobbing hysterically as the reality of her total ruin crashed down upon her. Liam lay on the floor, surrounded by federal agents, staring blankly at the scattered papers, his bleeding lip trembling. He realized in that exact, agonizing second that his medical records were real. He realized his perfect son was a lie. He realized his money was gone, his freedom was gone, and his name was permanently destroyed in front of the only society he ever cared about. His entire existence was a hollow, rotten fake. I stood on the marble staircase, looking down at the chaotic, pathetic mess of the three people who had tortured me, gaslighted me, and tried to destroy my sanity for 7 years. I did not smile. I did not laugh. I did not walk down the stairs to gloat or spit in their faces. They were no longer worth my words. They were not even worth my anger. I simply took one last, peaceful look at the wreckage, turned my back on them, and walked gracefully away into the beautiful, glittering night, leaving my glass of champagne on a silver tray. 6 months later, the dust had completely settled over Chicago. The board of directors at Vanguard Horizon Design unanimously voted to promote me to senior partner. I moved into a massive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Liam did not fare quite as well. Without a single dollar to his name and facing the unlimited legal wrath of a billionaire, he took a devastating plea deal. He was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary and forced into absolute, total bankruptcy. As for Chloe, the ruthless billionaire Julian Sterling swiftly took full legal custody of his biological son. He then threw Chloe out onto the street with absolutely nothing, ensuring no lawyer in the state of Illinois would ever take her case. She faded into complete obscurity, a broken woman who traded her soul for a life of luxury that never truly belonged to her. I stood by the window of my new office, feeling the warm morning sun wash over my face. For 7 years, I thought my life was over. I thought the worst pain was the betrayal. But looking out at the endless blue horizon of the city, I finally understood the truth. The greatest revenge you can ever achieve is not sinking your hands into the dirt to tear your enemies apart. The greatest revenge is simply stepping out of the way, letting the intense fire of their own lies burn their world to ashes, while you walk entirely free, unburdened, and brilliant, straight into the light. Hello again, dear listeners of Maya Revenge Stories. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for staying with me and listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and let me know your city or country. If you found today's story engaging and meaningful, please consider helping our team with just a $1 donation. You can scan the PayPal QR code on your screen right now, or use the PayPal link provided in the description and the pinned comment. Your generous support allows our dedicated staff to feed their families and continues to fund the creation of even more amazing stories for you to enjoy. Thank you, and take care.